Welcome to part 3. If this is the first video you're watching, you definitely want to catch the others to catch everything. One of the reasons why I made this series about Bill Cosby is because I've been painstakingly trying to convince people to stop rushing to judgment, stop being mindless, active participants in tabloid culture, and respect the law, which is that a man is innocent until he's proven guilty. In contrast, people believe things from sources they shouldn't trust and lack the self-control to adhere to their own laws. In fact, anytime someone simply reminds us what our laws are and what we should do, the powers that be dispatch their lapdogs and grandstanders to crowd shame them. And because of all the social conditioning of our tabloid culture, other brainwashed people all around you bully you for respecting the law. They do this so that we can all return to the mindless mayhem of doing away with laws, constitutional rights, and sentencing out of court via the tabloids with absolutely no evidence to speak of. I literally had to cut this video into 3 parts, mainly because a whole documentary on each accuser individually of over 50 women could be made about how they each either lied, distorted information, or don't have a rape case at all. All of them. When everyone easily considered Cosby a serial rapist, what the public at large did not know is that many of these Cosby accusers that have been paraded before you ceremoniously as victims are people who have routinely been picked up by the law, like Shaylin Lasha, Chloe Goins, or Linda Joy Traits. Some of these women have serious psychological issues, like Beverly Johnson, but the public doesn't know that. The Beverly Johnson who has spread false rumors in the past against actor Chris Noth, or Joan Tarshish, who should never have been led onto TV. Not only is her story ridiculous and fraudulent, she, by her own admission, is mentally ill and delusional.
I felt very spiritual, obsessed, and possessed by aliens, or I was God's chosen person, the Queen of the Jews. Then I thought pieces of garbage on the street had a meaning for me and held messages from God or space people. I remember my first series of manic episodes.
And Tamara Green, who as a lawyer defrauded several clients by pocketing their settlement money, then closing up shop. She was also suspended from practice. The courts also cited that Tamara Green has a mental health problem. Some on the Cosby accuser list include known drug addicts or pathological liars like P.J. Matson, Janice Dickinson, or Louisa Moritz. There's literally too much information to cram into the allotted time. None of these women or any of their stories check out. The TV hosts and news personalities that you know and trust did almost no acceptable journalistic research or reporting. They informed you about nothing, invited these mostly anonymous women who they knew nothing about as guests to speak freely outside of court on the national airwaves. Your favorite corporate news commentators all simply threw more logs into the burning flame that is the American media freak show. In the last section, I spoke about how the Cosby women can be broken into groups of thirds. In about 30 to 40 women, 1/3 or 10 to 15 women have already been caught in lies. The next third that I covered in the last videos are the women who don't have rape cases, but are going around on TV pretending and speaking as though they were raped by Bill Cosby. If you actually research the cases, there's a long list of these women who were not raped, but alleged to have been touched inappropriately, or Cosby came onto them. But by themselves standing alone, it was absolutely nothing, if it were even true or not. Some of the women in this category are Carla Ferrigno, Christina Rulli, Helen Hayes, Lisa Jones, or Angela Leslie. But as long as the media networks keep handing out checks, expect these women to keep coming out of the woodworks until someone puts a stop to this. The last third are the group of women who do claim to be both drugged and raped by Bill Cosby. But if you actually listened to their stories, you'd realize that none of their stories even make sense. They also include women who have a problem with their story in that they claim to have been drugged and raped by Bill Cosby, but it defies logic. Many of these women admit to have once been Cosby's mistress and had consensual sex with him for quite some time. They would like you to believe that while they were seeing Bill Cosby consensually for a long time, he just decided to drug him and rape him. Some of these women are Renita Cheney Hill and Beth Ferrier, to name a few. But the woman in this third group of thirds who stands out the most is the one who had the most credible story and is the one who stepped forth first. And that woman is Barbara Bauman. For quite some time now, she captivated everyone with her tales of being drugged and raped by one of the most famous men in the world. But allow me to kick in the door and walk you into the truth. Even though what Barbara Bauman alleged happened over 30 years ago, Bauman attempted to go public for the first time in 2004. Cosby has been on the scene since the late 60s, and it's funny, all the rumors on Cosby began sometime around the year 2000. All of a sudden, coincidentally around the same time that Cosby began to show interest in purchasing NBC. But I digress. Back to Bauman. I'm not sure if any person or entity encouraged Bauman to step up, but when Barbara Bauman first came forward with her story, she claimed no one believed her. Bauman tried to secure a lawyer, but by her own admission, was laughed right out of the office. And at the time, not even Gloria Allred wanted to touch it. True statement. And she's right. No one did believe her. But she isn't exactly forthright about the real reasons why no one believed her. She's trying to sell the new version of her story, which is the media's version, that Cosby was so big and powerful and everyone told her to keep quiet because she'd never win. And it's true, yes, they thought she'd never win. But her reasons are not exactly the truth. The real reason no one believed Barbara Bauman initially is because Barbara Bauman had no case against Bill Cosby. And at the time, everyone she told understood that but her. Just hang tight, I will explain. You see, the powers that be in the media know that most of you are not trained to think like lawyers. So if a woman who seems credible enough looks straight into the camera and says she was raped, most of you will believe it. And most people don't know how to detect holes in stories or to extract truth from fabrication. And in some cases, it's not even a case of the accuser lying, but a false accusation nonetheless. In a court of law, there's a little something called cross-examination. You can't just believe someone's account of something and throw the accused in jail. They must be cross-examined so that a judge and a jury can learn what happened and make a judgment. With that said, if after the first time she claimed Cosby drugged and raped her, she went to the authorities, Bill Cosby would have been in very big trouble. That's not what happened. If this went to court, Bauman would have to explain being in contact with Cosby for years, accepting financial support, being put up in housing on his dime, flying in and out of state, and attending some of his shows for years. And when it comes to the allegations of rape, she would have to convince a judge and a jury that she was having sex with Cosby for years, but every time she did, she was drugged and or raped. She was drugged and raped and stayed for more of the same. So naturally, people would wonder, after the first time she was drugged and raped and knew that she was raped, she said absolutely nothing to anyone about the rape and stayed for more drugging and raping. Now, there's a lot of entities that try to weigh in and redefine rape. And with some of these new schools of thought, some could make the argument that she was raped and just going along with it in some kind of brainwashed victim psychological mechanism. Of course I consider that, because I consider all things, but not when you have a multitude of contradictory scenarios and statements on public record like this. In Bauman's own words, he brainwashed me and made me feel like there was something wrong with me if I resisted his sexual advances. That is a hard situation, but that's not rape. Here's another statement. He turned out all the lights. It was completely pitch black. He laid me down on the couch and started caressing and touching me all over. Then he put my hands on his penis, covering it with his hand. He had me masturbate him. I couldn't see what was going on. When it was over, I ran out of the room and threw up. Also not good, but also not rape. She's describing something that she did, albeit begrudgingly, but she did it. And here's my pick of the litter. And this is the pick of the litter for me, because I've never heard a rape victim say this. Quote, "I knew something was wrong, that this was a twisted situation, but if I resisted, I was failing him and failing my good fortune. He was my pot of gold, and I needed to take care of it." End quote. Now, here's the tough justice part of the equation. And almost nobody wants to think judiciously in the other direction, because many of us are so swept away and caught up with the narrative we chose to believe. But we must be fair. Is there a casting couch situation in Hollywood? Of course there is. And I'm no fan of it. And let's not be irrational and all point the finger at Cosby like he's the boogeyman and he's the only one. And let's step off of this media-directed nonsense and stop pretending that only women are dealing with this. It's pervasive, and lots of people, men and women, have to navigate through the industry cautiously. And Hefner, Cosby, all those guys were doing the same things, but Cosby is ever so obviously swept into an agenda now. Here's some more hard truth about this situation. Lots of us, myself included, have experienced things that we're not too proud of. And some of those things, unfortunately, entailing decisions we've made. And some of our unfortunate past experiences may make us feel dirty, cheap, used. And that truly is unfortunate. But you don't get the right to be, by all signs and evidence, a willing participant in a bad situation. And when it doesn't work out the way you expected or wanted, completely bypass all legal protocol until the statute of limitations expires. Then come back 20, 30 years later and tell the whole world, in the man's wintering years, with everything he's ever achieved on the line, that he raped you. He doesn't get a day in court and gets demonized forever. That's not right, and that is not justice. Sometimes true justice doesn't make everyone happy, But what a legal mind would deduce from everything we know is that at some point, she may not have wanted to do this, but she went along with it, believing it would lead to her hopes and dreams. And when it didn't happen, retroactively, she's decided she had been raped. That's why, no matter where you fall on the issue, the law says no.
What made her choose this job? How did this happen?
And I guess I get kind of the opposite in that those who came up with me through the tradition of being a trial lawyer, those who believe that the justice system is actually supposed to work and that either you get your day in court or you move on, those who wanted to see a defense and believe that Mr. Cosby is entitled to a good and capable defense have been emailing and texting and tweeting and saying, finally, and thank God, and glad you did it. And I was sort of wondering before I was approached if there were any real trial lawyers and defense lawyers still left in the world who are not shaped and framed by public opinion and so afraid to actually stand up and say what their real legal opinion is and offer legal expertise, because to me, this case has always been clear from the beginning on the legal issues. I understand why people have different perceptions emotionally, why they have different perceptions psychologically, why they may have different guttural reactions to it. But for me, as an attorney, it's very
clear. There's another thing to say,
and
I support him. And you described yourself as a supporter of Mr. Cosby. What makes you support him?
No, I said that people who were supporters saw me, but I certainly consider myself to be a supporter. And
were you one before he hired you? Like when you were just watching the case and following it, were you saying, Mr. Cosby's being wronged here?
Oh, that's how I got hired. Yeah. Because I was speaking out and saying that I believe that this is wrong. I believe that our justice system works the way it's supposed to for a reason. I believe in due process. I believe that people are innocent until they're proven guilty. And if you can't prove them guilty in a court through prosecution, then you don't get the option of persecution instead. I don't think that 10, 20, 30, 40 years later, people get to decide to come forward when there is no opportunity, not just for Mr. Cosby to offer a defense for a criminal prosecution, but there's no opportunity for an alleged victim, for an accuser, to prove up what actually happened. And that's the thing that I think is really lost in this entire media kind of debate that this has turned into, that if these claims, some of them, had been brought years ago, they would have been summarily dismissed. That's not something that police departments would look at and say that that's corroborating evidence to show that a crime was committed if what they brought was on some date in this year, say circa 1974. I was with this man at some place, and then it's proven that he was not even there. It would have been summarily dismissed, but instead, they earn themselves a seat in a chair on the front of a magazine. They get interviewed over and over by various media outlets. Their story gets told over and over again, and it is taken as truth, even though my client has released statements just summarily denying the accusation, saying, one, I never offered any woman anything and she refused it, and then I insisted upon her taking it. I never slipped drugs into any woman's drink and then after that took advantage of them sexually. Those things did not happen.
Now, I wish I could explain to you just how deep the rabbit hole goes, and how secret societies, covert racist organizations, and government institutions, powerful special interest groups, and yes, satanic cults govern society, orchestrate events, and control a lot of what you see, read, and hear. But that's too deep a subject to divert into. Let's just say in recent times, and for varying reasons, Cosby has ignited the wrath of several entities, which is why you are seeing this lynching spectacle. In fact, Bill Cosby has been on an FBI government enemy list back in 1971, put there by President Nixon. And Cosby's recent maneuvering has reignited the wrath of elite groups. Cosby was attempting to empower people of color and poor people, and he was on a speaking tour of sorts. He was also trying to buy a network to improve the portrayal of people of color. Only people from above didn't like what he had to say or what he was trying to do. They were watching him. Cosby wanted Black America to stop blaming white people, stop waiting for white handouts, and encouraged Black America to grab the reins of their own destinies and enterprises. He was calling people into action. Because they did not agree with his message, they blotted out the power of his message that had very much to do with self-reliance, self-preservation, and Black enterprise, with himself as a living example. And they reduced it to, Cosby tells Black America to pull up their pants. Yes, he did say that, but it was only a fraction of what he actually said. Regardless, lots of impressionable Black people who sat listening to television blurbs, mired in rampant stupidity, pride, and lack of respect for their elder statesmen. People who had absolutely no idea what else the man was saying bit the bait the media placed in front of them, and overnight, lots of anti-Cosby rhetoric began to pick up steam. Phase 2. Enter Hannibal Buress. Buress, one of many complaining about Cosby and the excerpts from his speeches that had nothing to do with his overall message, went on stage and began calling Cosby a rapist in response. Now think about this. Hannibal Buress was never that famous or a big deal for people to ever want to encapsulate anything about him. No one cared about him. Yet, for some strange reason, someone was there to record his whole bit on Cosby. And for another strange reason, the video of this virtually unknown comedian went viral, and the news media kept talking about it over and over. Phase 3. All of a sudden, Cosby rape memes started popping up all over the place from unknown sources. When Cosby asked fans to meme him, he was gang-stalked by these unknown entities who kept the rape memes coming. Where were they coming from? In retrospect, no one knows exactly. Then, at the height of all the fabricated hysteria about Cosby and rape, Barbara Bauman, closely followed by Beverly Johnson, had very prepared and detailed op-eds all ready and set to go. After Bauman was placed right smack on primetime TV with her story, just in case you had any doubts, boom, they sent in Beverly Johnson. Shortly after that, boom, Janice Dickinson, and then all the rest one by one. In a very planned and orchestrated spectacle, shocking numbers began to pour in, all of a sudden. 2014 to 2015 was supposed to be a very big comeback year for Cosby, with a new Cosby Show coming out and all. That's why he was shut down with so much haste. Even though there was no trial, conviction, or legal validation of any of this, the news media kept leading these unvetted people and their stories onto TV. Netflix and NBC obnoxiously and quickly yanked all of Cosby's shows just like that, without any discussion about it. Everything moved extremely fast, almost as though they knew this was going to happen and awaited it. All of the TV networks suddenly canceled all of Cosby's TV appearances. The Navy publicly discussed revoking Cosby's honors with their institution. Even President Obama was forced to publicly make a statement about Cosby because people strangely asked him about Cosby when he was supposed to be talking about the Iran deal. Everyone on The View, The Talk, Wendy Williams, everyone was chiming in with very negative commentary, talking about something that had no merit outside of court, but was part of a public smear campaign that had been ordered into effect. All this as the number of women didn't seem to stop. No, they didn't tell us anything about most of these women or what their claims actually were, or if they were even possible. They just kept telling us more women are coming forward. Orchestrated agenda complete. Who was Bill Cosby? Well, America, in one of its darkest periods in time, would like to redefine that for us and X him out of history in imposed disgrace. Whether she succeeds or not, I will remind each of you viewing this a little bit about who he is. Bill Cosby is a man who set the bar very high for African Americans, and he paved the way for people of color that will always be unparalleled. You see, because of the smut now thrown on him, they would like you to forget that before Cosby, there were hardly any black people in serious roles on TV. Bill Cosby helped break that mold and allowed others to follow after him. He didn't stop there. He was a man of character and purpose in everything that he did. As a black male, he maintained a standard for himself that everyone had to respect. He refused the typical roles assigned to black actors like drug dealers, pimps, or thugs, and chose positive portrayals. And if those roles didn't exist, he incredibly became instrumental in creating those roles for himself and for other actors of color. He was funny and clever without being profane or vulgar. He ingeniously exuded black pride, but not being angry or militant, but by being warm, welcoming, charming, and brilliant. He almost single-handedly made younger generations of black children aspire to go to college and to see themselves as productive members of society. For the first time, they saw positive imagery of people who looked like them. He became a beloved father figure to aspire to be like. But now, a part of history has been damaged and altered by unclean hands. A legacy has come under attack to be rewritten and eclipsed. He, like the rest of us, is human and imperfect, and we as human beings all have faults. But he kept dark aspects of himself out of the light to promote an image much more greater than himself for a people who needed it. A comedian, an intellectual, a father, a teacher, a trailblazer, an activist, a mogul, and a master storyteller has become a story in the news. And for all that he has done, and despite what he meant to so many people, he wasn't even given a day in a real court for sentencing, for an opportunity for real justice. He was swept to the side without due process, ridiculed, berated, and harshly sentenced by the crowd led out of control to be forgotten. I, for one, am positioned with resolve to not let that happen.
Black history, lost, stolen, or strayed.
No, I could never fit in that. Never get in that at all. This is more like it. Now, what's the whitest thing you know? Whiter than the driven snow, whiter than the whites of your eyes? Sugar. Non-integrated, non-black, sweet sugar. But you see, there is a black man in your sugar. His name is Norbert Rillier. Norbert Rillier in 1846 invented a vacuum pan, revolutionized the sugar refining industry. Now, you have to dig to find that fact. I mean, it's not much history, but it's still history. Now, what do you stand in? In your shoes. Now, there's just you and your shoes, isn't there? Nope. See, there's a black man standing in your Oxfords with you, sharing your soul